गरीब देते हैं पुरसा तुम्हारे प्यारों का। सलाम तुम पे हमारे रसूल के प्यारों।
على حب علي بن أبي طالب صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. Some of you have kindly asked if a copy of this presentation could be available. This is actually a screenplay I have written on the event of Karbala, which I'm choosing parts which are presentable here. And before this is made into a film, of course you should not give away your screenplay, you know that. So unfortunately we have to wait until I find my investors and producers, and then this film comes. This is made, and then inshallah the text will be available. I begin from when Umar ibn Sa'd orders the commence of the battle. Ibn Sa'd, angry of horse defection, yells at Durayd, "Durayd, bring forth the standard." While Durayd is coming forth, Ibn Sa'd puts an arrow in his bow and shouts, shouting, "Be my witnesses before Ibn Ziyad that I shot the first arrow." You know, Ibn Sa'd was not convinced that he should take the battle against the Hussein because he knew the consequences in the hereafter. However, here, since he is now tempted for the governance of Ray, which was of course the whole Iran at that time, he wanted to show that he is quite loyal. The arrow sits in the ground and a few yards from Hussein and his companions. Muslim, son of Awsajah, says, so it begins. He goes forth and stands before Hussein. "My Lord, on behalf of all your companions, may I request a favor." "What favor?" asks Hussein. Muslim replies that no man from the house of Prophet ever goes forth for battle before we all have ceased to exist. We very much hope that our request is granted, so that our hearts rest assured that we have defended the family of our Prophet with the blood that runs in our heart. Suddenly a barrage of arrows darkens the air, and Ibn Sa'd's cavalry is mobilized. The archers of Hussein respond the shooting, but no one in any of the two camps is hurt. Amr, son of Hajjaj, launches a fierce attack on the right wing of Hussein's troops. Habib commands his foot soldiers to go forth and line up. As Amr and his troops draw close, he shouts to his soldiers, "Kneel!" The troops kneel. Amr and his men come closer. He orders the spears up. The horses face suddenly with raised spears, shy and turn back. The attackers disperse and retreat. Habib commands the archers to pelt them with arrows as they run away, killing and injuring a number of them. Hor goes before Hussein and asks, "My Lord, do you allow me to go for single combat?" Hussein nods. Hur goes forth and stands before the Kufa troops and starts to brag. Who would dare to be my match, so that I drench the shaft of my spear in his blood? A formidable man comes out and stands before him. You brag too much, Hur, while you deserve so little. I already smell your blood on the blade of my sword. Hur engages with him and soon brings him down. Nafi, son of Hilal, stands out and asks for a match. He also soon kills his contender. Another man comes out from Hussein's camp and asks for his match. However, angry and frustrated, Amr, son of Hajjaj, shouts, "You stupid idiots, don't you realize who you are fighting with? These are knights of the town who have come here seeking death. Don't let anyone fight in single combat with them. There's only a few of them. You could finish them off even by throwing stones at them." Umar ibn Sa'd, hearing his cry, tells Durayd, "He's right, Durayd. Get the message to all the commanders that none of their men should fight in single combat." Amr, son of Hajjaj, launches another attack from the direction of the Euphrates. A fierce battle starts with the perseverance of the small right wing of Hussein against the enormous troops of Amr, helped by more soldiers from the main army. Shamr is watching to see if the left wing of Hussein's troops would make a mistake and move to support the right wing. However, Habib vigilantly stands in place with Shamr's troops under strict observation. In the heat of the battle, Muslim, son of Awsajah, is struck down. Amr and his men eventually withdraw. When the dust settles, Hussein and his followers find Muslim stretched out, dying. Hussein dismounts and walks towards him, sits beside his head, removes dust and blood from his face, and says, "May God have mercy on you, Muslim. This is as is written in the book. Of them are some who fulfilled their pledge, and of them are some who still wait." He chokes and stands. Habib rushes to him and sits beside him with tears in his eyes. "Muslim," says Habib, "your death is hard for me to bear. Rejoice with the good news of heaven." Muslim replies with a very weak voice, "May God bring you good news too." Habib replies, "I would have liked to carry out all your wishes if I was not sure that I would follow you soon." Muslim dies with his head in Habib's hands. Shem charges against the left wing. Habib leaves Muslim and rushes towards his troops. In the ensuing fierce battle, Shem is forced to retreat. The cavalry under Urwa, son of Qais, then attacks from all sides. Hussein's cavalry put him in the middle and defends him from all directions, even though there are only 32 horsemen. They do not attack any side of the Kufan cavalry without putting it to flight. Seeing the flight of his men, Urwa shouts at his officer, "Where are the archers? Why doesn't Ibn Sa'd send in the archers?" Ibn Sa'd shouts at the officer sent by Urwa, "What on earth do you want the archers for? There are only 30 horsemen. You should have finished them all off by now." The officer replies, "You are right, Commander, but they seem invincible." Ibn Sa'd ponders for a while and then commands Ibn Numayr, "Ibn Numayr, move the archers." The battle is continuing with no respite. Huge numbers of archers move forth. Ibn Numayr and Harmala put them in array and order them to shoot. A rain of arrows pour down on Hussein's cavalry. Many men are hit and many horses are lamed. Hur loses his horse. He continues fighting on foot, but is soon overpowered and struck down. Since the arrows hit men from both sides, the Kufan army retreats. Hussein's army also goes back, taking their casualties with them. As they put horse body down, Hussein walks to him and sits by his body. His forehead is cleaved by the stroke of the sword. Hussein wipes his eyes and his eyebrows of blood and ties a green strap round his forehead. He kisses his head and whispers, "You were a free man, as your mother named you, Hur." Watching the situation, Shem wears his satanic smile and says, "It is now time to take the camps." He charges towards the camps with his troops. Zuhair attacks them with 10 horsemen and in a fierce engagement manages to drive them back. The archers go forward again and pelt Hussein's men with arrows. The arrows go as far as hitting some tents and terrifying women and children. Many of Hussein's men are down. The battle is going in some quarters. Hussein, who's watching the combat, turns his face upwards. The sun is in the middle of the sky. A companion of Hussein, seeing this, asks, "Shall I call the adhan, my lord?" "Yes," says Hussein, "may God have mercy on you." The companion calls the faithful to prayer. Upon hearing the voice of the adhan, Hussein's troops gradually retreat. Hussein takes off his armor and makes tayammum by calmly hitting his 2 palms on the ground and rubbing it on his face and on the back of his hands. He puts on a clean white turban and orders Zuhair and Sa'id al-Hanafi to stand before him with half of his troops. This is Salatul Khawf, of course, which is made in the battle, which is said in the battle. And he starts the prayer, leading the other half. Taking this as an opportunity, Ibn Sa'd orders his archers to move forward. Again, they hail Hussein and his troops with arrows. Most of the arrows are warded off by the shields put together by both cavalry and foot soldiers. However, some come down by the praying congregation. Seeing the danger, Sa'id moves quickly to stand before Hussein as a human shield. While he is doing this, the 2 halves of the group of Hussein's companions switch places so that those who have not prayed have a chance to pray behind Hussein. Harmala and other soldiers on the side of the archers are keen to target Hussein himself. Arrows start to fall close to Hussein. Sa'id wards off any shot coming at Hussein by his hands, arms and body. He's hit several times but struggles to continue standing as a shield. Hussein finishes his prayer and Sa'id falls in his hands. His body is pierced by arrows. Hussein carries him in his arms and lays his body beside the other martyrs. Hussein's troops have lined up again. Hussein rides his horse and goes to stand in their midst. Abbas, son of Shabib, comes out of the line and stands before Hussein. "My lord," says Abbas, "will you allow me to go for single battle?" "I don't think they would fight single combat," says Hussein. "Allow me to try, my lord." Hussein nods. Abbas goes forth and calls for a contender. No one moves forward. Abbas discards his shield, shouting, "Come forth, I have no shield. Isn't there a single man among you cowards brave enough to fight a soldier without a shield?" As he receives no reply, he starts to take off all his armor as well. "Come forth, you chickens!" As he still receives no reply, he charges forward into the troops. He put on a formidable fight, killing and maiming many before he is struck down. From among the foot soldiers, Wahab goes to Hussein and asks for his permission. "You don't have to fight, Wahab. Your wife and your mother need you." This is the Christian man who has followed Hussein, of course. "My lord, I have not come all this way to see you killed by these heartless people. Please, my lord. Hussein nods and says, don't you want to bid farewell to your family? After just recite the salawat, please. After Wahab is slain and is down, Joan, the servant of Hussein, goes forth. This is the black, very, very famous black man of Ashura, of Karbala. Do you allow me, my lord? Hussein, you have come here to serve us. You are not expected to fight. Tears come to Joan's eyes. You mean I'm not noble enough to have the honor of fighting before you and protecting your kin from these vile people? Tears prevent Hussein from speaking. They just hug and clasp each other firmly. Joan leaves. Hussein mounts his horse and stands in line with the members of his family. There are 18 men and none of the companions are left with them. Joan fights bravely and falls after striking down several men. Abbas and Ali Akbar rush and disperse enemy troops to let others bring his body back. After Joan has been brought back, Ali Akbar goes and stands before his father. Father, says Ali Akbar, it's only us left now. Do you allow me now to go and fight? Hussein says firmly, go my son. Ali Akbar turns and thrusts towards the enemy. As he distances from his father, Hussein says with the tearful eyes raised to sky, O my exalted, incomparable Lord, you are the greatest witness that they are now fighting a noble youth who alone among living men is closest of all to your beloved Prophet in speech and talk, in behavior, character, even in his walk. His beautiful face and superlative manners were so that whenever I suffered from missing the Holy Prophet, I set my gaze on him to console my heart. Ali Akbar stands before the Kufans and draws his sword, saying, I am Ali, son of the noblest of all men, Hussein, who is closer to the Prophet than anyone else on the earth plane. I swear that so long as my hands can hold the sword, I will defend my father against your ignoble horde. He then immediately charges. Wherever he attacks, he scatters the Kufans. After taking some wounds, he breaks the circle of Kufans round him and rides back to his father. Standing before him, he says, panting, Father, the thirst is killing me, and the burden of the heavy armor is hampering me. Is there any chance of just a sip of water? Hussein cries visibly, just go, my son. It's only for a little while longer. You will soon visit your grandfather and he will quench your thirst. Go. Ali Akbar gallops back to the battlefield. He fights until he is hit by a spear in his side. He falls on his horse's neck, whose own face is hit by a sword, and who therefore cannot find his way out of the enemy's siege. While the horse is struggling, every Kufan strikes a sword at Ali Akbar. He is torn to shreds and falls from his horse, whereupon the Kufans leave him. Hussein rushes towards him with a group of his men. While the others take guard, Hussein dismounts and sits by Ali Akbar's body, his eyes filled with tears. He puts Ali Akbar's head on his lap and wipes blood from his eyes. He then kisses his forehead and puts his cheek on Ali's and says, weeping, "May God show no mercy to those who killed you. How foolhardy they are against the Lord in violating the sanctity of the Prophet." He then raises his head and looking at Ali's body says, "There will only be dust. There will only be dust in the world after you." Hussein's attention is distracted towards Zainab, who's hurrying towards them, crying. "My dear one," cries Zainab, "my nephew, my dear one, my brother." Here Zainab knows the situation of Hussein is worse than Ali Akbar now. She throws herself on the dead body of Ali Akbar and weeps. Hussein waits for a few moments and then raises her head and leads her back to the tent. On his way, he requests the young men of his family to bring Ali Akbar back. As they bring Ali Akbar's corpse back, the battle continues at the front. An arrow is shot at Abdullah, son of Muslim ibn Aqil. He tries to deflect it with his hand, but the arrow sews his hand to his forehead. A spear comes, hurting in an attack, piercing his heart and killing him while he is unable to defend himself. Other members of Hussein's family are then attacked. Abbas fights valiantly but cannot stop his relatives falling prey to the Kufans. In the heat of the battle, Aun and Ja'far, sons of Zainab, are killed. Zainab watches but does not move from her place. Eventually, after many are killed, Abbas and his brothers manage to drive the enemy back. They gather around Hussein. They are the only ones together that are at the front. Qasim, Abdullah and Bakr, sons of Hassan, and few other of Hussein's men are further back in position. Seeing the 5 sons of Ali standing in a row, Shem says to one of his officers, this is Abbas and his brothers and Hussein, "Look, they're all there, the 5 sons of Ali. It is time to get our revenge from their father. Attack them." "But they are your relatives, sir," replies the officer. "They are more related to Ali than to me," says Shem. The officer charges forward with a large dispatch. Abbas asks his brothers to go and ward them off. The trio go and make a magnificent fight, managing to drive the enemy back. They are, however, eventually surrounded and killed. Qasim, son of Hassan, who's on foot, goes forward and says, "Uncle, do I have your permission?" Hussein dismounts and looks at him for a while. Qasim's face is shining, although his lips are blistered with thirst. Hussein caresses his hair and smells it. Tears come to his eyes. "The fragrance of my brother Hassan," says Hussein. Qasim, "Can I go, uncle?" Hussein replies, "But how could I let you? You cannot even wear a piece of armor." "It doesn't matter," replies Qasim. "Did you not tell me last night that I could also become a martyr?" "Yes, but I cannot let you go," says Hussein. "Please, uncle, please. How can I live after you?" They hug and cry. Abbas is in tears over his horse. Hussein reluctantly lets go of Qasim and nods his permission. "Go." Qasim smiles and leaves. Hussein walks a few steps after him as if trying to hold him back. Qasim goes forth and stands before the foot soldiers. He is wearing only a shirt and a waistcloth and a pair of sandals, one of whose straps is broken. He shouts, "Just in case you don't know who I am Qasim, son of Hassan, the grandson of the Prophet. Shame on you. This is Hussein among you, like a captive in this desolate desert." While he's talking, one of the horsemen says to his fellow combatant, "Who is this boy? I will make his mother mourn for him." His companion replies, "Why? He's just a child. What do you want his blood on your hands for?" The horseman replies, "He's just some brazen, loud-mouthed kid." Meanwhile, Qasim has started fighting with one of the foot soldiers. The horseman charges towards him and, passing by him from the back, strikes his head with his sword. Qasim shouts, "Uncle," and is knocked down. Hussein and Abbas gallop towards him in an instant. While Abbas disperses others, Hussein attacks the horseman and strikes him with sword. The man tries to fend off the blow with his arm, but his arm is sliced off at the elbow. He gives out a loud shriek, which is heard by the soldiers in his camp. They charge forward to save him, but in the ensuing battle, he is trampled to death on the horse's hooves. A large dust cloud covers the whole scene. As it clears, Hussein is seen sitting over Qasim's body while Abbas guards the area. Qasim is rubbing his feet against the ground in pain. Caressing Qasim's face, Hussein says in tears, "May God withdraw his mercy from those who killed you. Their complainant on the day of judgment will be your grandfather." Qasim utters with a very weak voice, "Uncle." Hussein is now very sensational. "Ah, it's hard for your uncle that you called him and he did not answer. Or rather he answered, but he could not save you. For by God his enemies are too many and his helpers are very few." Hussein lifts Qasim in his arms and brings him back. Qasim's brother Abu Bakr comes forward, looking in agony at his brother's body, and looking in agony at his brother's body, nods his respect to his uncle and rushes to the battlefield. Hussein brings Qasim and puts him beside his son Ali Akbar's body. He throws a glance at the bodies of all his young relatives and cries. As he is sitting there, Abbas brings Abu Bakr's body and lays him down beside the others. He is hit by an arrow in his forehead. They exchange a sad glance. Hussein suddenly stands up and goes in front of the army and shouts, "Is no one out there to help us? Is there not anyone willing to protect the family of his prophet?" In the army of Ibn Sa'd, some cast their heads down, while the smile of victory covers the faces of others. In Hussein's camp, Sukaina, Rubab, and other women come out of the tents and join Zainab, who's holding Ali Asghar in her arms. All faces carry tears. Abbas goes to Hussein and brings him back. Hussein goes to Zainab and pauses for a while, looking at Ali Asghar's face. He then takes him from Zainab and sits in front of the tent, talking to him. "I know you are thirsty, my son. I'm sorry, but your father has no other choice." He fondles Ali's parched lips with his finger, then hopelessly tries to get some saliva from his own mouth to rub on his lips. Shamr wears his evil smile and blames Harmala, who's posed to release his arrow. "Why don't you shoot, you pathetic layabout?" Harmala asks, "The father or the son?" "The son makes him grieve more," replies Shamr. Harmala aims and shoots. While Hussein is killing Ali Asghar, the arrow hits his throat. Blood splashes on Hussein's face. Sukaina rushes to Rubab and hugs her. Zainab rushes towards Hussein and holds Ali. Hussein helplessly watches the gushing out of the blood. He cries and holds his hand under Ali's throat. His hands are full of blood. Hussein looks at it for a while and then throws it up to the sky and shouts, "My Lord, what makes all my calamities easy for me is the fact that you are watching. If you have withdrawn the help of heaven from us, let it be so, for your purpose is better than immediate help." He then takes Ali from Zainab and brings him to where other bodies are lying, cuddling and caressing him. He leaves him to rest there. Going back, he's faced with Rabab, who's surrounded by the children who have come out to see Ali's fate. Looking into Rabab's eyes for a few moments, Hussein says, "I'm sorry." Rabab wipes her tears and, trying to be firm, replies, "No, not at all. I'm not worried for Ali Asghar. I'm worried for you." Hussein looks at the children's faces and fondles their lips. He then goes to Abbas resolutely and says, "Abbas, let us go and get some water." Abbas nods in happy agreement. "Yes, my lord," he says. As they get prepared, Rabab walks towards the bodies. Sukaina follows her, but Zainab stops her. "Leave her," says Zainab. Rabab goes and sits beside Ali Asghar and fondles his face, and all of a sudden bursts into a pitiful cry. Hussein and Abbas, in full armor, are on their horses, each with a water skin at the ready on his shoulder. "Go," says Hussein. They start at a fleeting gallop toward the river. The guards are alarmed and form a thick line to meet them. Hussein and Abbas fiercely hit their lines. The battle is so intense that Ibn Sa'd sends more troops, including archers, to help. Amr, son of Hajjaj, shouts, force them apart, you cannot win so long as they are together." Hussein and Abbas resist parting, but eventually the troops create some distance between them. Abbas moves close to the river and Hussein is held back. The fighting continues until an arrow sits in Hussein's chin and forces him to withdraw while Abbas is moving forward. Hussein goes and stands at a distance, and while watching Abbas's advancement, plucks the arrow out. Blood pours out. Hussein ties the wound with a piece of cloth. Abbas, blooded by his wounds, rides his horse into the river and quickly dismounts. Instinctively, he fills his palms with water and brings them close to his mouth. However, catching sight of Hussein's thirsty face, he pours the water back, and deflecting arrows with his shield, he fills his water skin after a fashion. He then rides his horse and emerges from the river. Looking at the thick lines of Kufan troops in front of him, he decides to take a diversion towards the palm trees, which seem to be longer but free of troops. Galloping with full speed, he fights his way through, striking with his sword any soldiers who dare to block his way. A group of about 20 riders are guarding the area of the palms. Standing together, they see Abbas coming towards them like a tsunami. Fear is evident in their faces. One of the horsemen says to their commander, "He will swallow us. What we do?" "Stay put," says the commander. "He should not pass through us." As Abbas approaches, the fear intensifies in their faces. A couple of the soldiers just run away. The commander shouts, "Hold! Hold!" However, he himself becomes so frightened that eventually he shouts, "Disperse behind the palms." They disperse just before Abbas arrives. Arriving at the palm trees, Abbas pauses for a few seconds, looking around and inspecting the area. He then chooses a route and rushes through. As he passes by the trees, one of the horsemen suddenly jumps out and strikes his right arm with his sword. The arm is severed and drops down, followed by the water skin. Abbas manages to grab the water skin with his left hand and put it round his neck. He pauses for a moment, panting and bleeding. He shouts, "Even if you have cut off my right hand, I'm going to support Hussein. So long as I live, he is the grandson of your prophet, you traitors." Getting sight of what happened, Hussein rushes towards Abbas, brandishing his sword and shouting his name. Abbas starts riding again at full speed, swerving to avoid further ambushes. A couple of new ambushes are unsuccessfully launched against him, but he cannot escape the third one, in which his left arm is sliced off. Abbas pauses again. He can see the camps, but he is considerably weakened and hardly able to spur his horse on. The horse circles for a couple of rounds before Abbas manages to control it with his knees. He says to himself, "Don't worry, Abbas, just a few hundred more yards to go. Go on, my steed, go. We have to take this water to the camps." He starts looking straight towards the camps again. However, disappointment stops him as he watches the arrows landing in the water skin. As the water flows on his body, tears flow down his eyes. "No, no, brother, help." Hussein is drawing closer, but is still too far away to be able to hear. Suddenly a two-pronged arrow hits Abbas's eyes. His horse whinnies loudly and circles round. A soldier charges at him and strikes him on the head with a long mace, causing him to fall from his horse. Hussein arrives and follows the soldiers, who all flee from him. He then returns and jumps from his saddle. Looking at the nearly mutilated body of his brother, he cries out aloud. He plucks the arrow from his brother's eyes and kisses him, hugs and embraces him. An uproar of joy is heard from the Kufan army. Ibn Sa'd and his retinue watch Hussein taking the reins of his horse, as while still crying, he leaves Abbas. Shabath states, "I don't think Hussein will be able to lift the sword anymore." "Don't bet on it," says Umar ibn Sa'd. "He is Ali's son." "Look, he cannot even get on his horse," says Shabath. "We've broken his backbone," says Ibn Umayr. "I agree with you," says Umar ibn Sa'd. "I serve at the test of triumph now. Give the soldiers some respite to breathe the victory." Hussein returns to the camp, hauling his horse behind him. He's completely broken. Zainab rushes towards him. Come and rest for a while, my brother," says Zainab. She makes Hussein sit down. Hussein looks into her eyes and says, "Zainab, Abbas." "I know," says Zainab, "I know. You don't need to tell me anything." Then, as tears flow down her cheeks, she says, "I wished I had some water to give you." The left wing of Ibn Sa'd army moves. Zainab helps Hussein to get up. He then rides his horse and joins the 3 members of his family who are still alive. They set out towards the left wing. A fierce battle forces the troops back, but only after the 3 companions of Hussein are killed. Hussein returns to his camp to catch some breath. Standing on a height, a view from above shows him single-handedly challenging the 30,000 troops of Kufa. Zainab, Sukaina, Rubab and other women come out of the tent. Sukaina starts crying, but Zainab reproaches her. "Don't cry before him," says Zainab. "I cry for his loneliness," replies Sakina. "Contain yourself," says Zainab. They go and stand before Hussein, trying hard to control their tears. Hussein dismounts. "They cannot get anywhere near you so long as I'm alive," says Hussein. Tears come to his eyes. "But you are going to have hard times. You will see things much worse than what you saw today. I want you to be firm and let the followers of my grandfather know what you saw today." He turns to conceal his tears. Muhammad al-Baqir runs and holds his hand. You know, Imam Baqir was only 4 years old then. He takes him in his arms away from the troops and goes to Ali Zain al-Abidin's tent. He kneels beside Ali's bed. Drenched in sweat, Ali opens his eyes. Hussein removes the sweat from his face. Ali speaks under his breath, "Father, I'm sorry that I cannot help you." Hussein kisses his face. Durayd, carrying the standard, goes to Ibn Sa'd and asks, "What is the command?" Ibn Sa'd replies, "Tell Shabath to move the foot soldiers and take the camps." Durayd is seen galloping towards the foot soldiers. After meeting Shabath, The trumpet begin to blow and drums are beaten. Dray trots in front and the imposing foot soldiers move. Hussein comes out of the tent. The women look terrified. Go inside your tents, says Hussein. He then mounts his horse and curries its neck. Sukaina comes forth in tears and holds his foot. Father, says Sukaina. Hussein smiles at her and says, farewell, Sukaina, go, please. Sukaina lets his foot go and reluctantly leaves. Hussein puts on his hood and draws his sword. No one is outside the tents now except Zainab. The troops have drawn closer. Hussein takes a deep breath and charges forward with lightning speed. He hits the battery of foot soldiers like a thunderstorm, smashing them from every side. The foot soldiers retreat. Hussein returns and stands in his original position near his camp. Catching his breath, he says, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The cavalry from the left wing moves towards his camp. Hussein curries his horse's neck and says, I know you are thirsty, but bear with me for some while more. Then he charges towards the left wing, again hits hard and puts up an enormous battle. The troops run away from him from all directions, seeing his way open. He rides towards the river. As he fights his way towards the water, the right wing of the Kufa troops move towards his camp. Catching sight of this, he quickly returns and shouts at Shamr, if you have no faith and do not fear the hereafter, at least have integrity of character in your life. What do you want, son of Ali, says Shamr. Why are you going to my camps? Fight me so long as I'm alive. Shamr replies with his devilish smirk, you are granted that. They charge towards him, but he puts them into flight again and returns to his elevated piece of land to catch some breath, while he sees everything blurred and smoky. He utters his favorite clause again, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Shem rides towards Ibn Numayr and shouts at him, don't you see how my troops are suffering from Hussein? Are your archers dead? Hussein launches another attack, this time before reaching the enemy lines. A hail of arrows come to him. He deflects some with his shield, but is hit by some others. He engages with the troops while his back has started to resemble as a hedgehog due to the many arrows sticking out of it. The troops are dispersed, but the bleeding has consumed Hussein's energy. He stops, surrounded by the troops. From a height, Zainab is watching the battle with great concern. A spearman rides toward Hussein and charges his spear into his side. As Hussein begins to fall from the horse, he utters, Bismillah wa billah. He falls down and lands on the soil, but immediately gets up. He fends off a couple of attacks using his sword, but the horseman hits him hard on the shoulder, causing him to fall again. Hussein's face hits the ground hard. Zainab cries and moves forward. Hussein is now surrounded by a huge number of soldiers, all of whom are trying to strike him with whatever weapon they have. She sees Hussein's horse struggling out of the crowd and galloping towards the camp. Suddenly Abdullah, son of Hassan, dashes towards his uncle, shouting and crying, leave him, leave my uncle alone. Zainab jumps towards him. He was very young, he was 8-9 years old. Zainab jumps towards him to hold him back, but he struggles himself free from her. Zainab weeps and shouts, no, Abdullah, no, please don't go. She watches helplessly as Abdullah wends his way through the crowd, and when after a short while his dead body is thrown out. The horse, its saddle dangling upside down, come to Zainab. As she lies in the dust, he smells her and noise. Tears can be seen in his eyes. The horse then goes to the camps and circle the tents, gnawing. The women come out of their tents and seeing Hussein's horse with inverted saddle start weeping. After a short while, everything changes. Suddenly a blustery wind blows and red dust fills the air. The horses in the Kufa camp nigh and seem uncomfortable. The soldiers are frightened. Hussein's horse makes a loud neighing sound and gallops back to the battlefield. The women hug each other and weep. The horse comes back with his face covered in blood. The women circle around him and cry, but soon they are dispersed as the Kufa troops attack now that Hussein is no more. The Battle of Karbala ended with the martyrdom of Hussein, but the story did not end there and is relived again and again. Ashura was not the day of an eventual conclusion. Rather, it was the beginning of an everlasting inspiration. The message of Hussein flowed through the tunnel of time to reach the future generations with ever-refreshing impact. It was imparted by history, by passion, and by tears. His Shiites made Karbala a place of pilgrimage and its soil a sacred and valuable object on which they prostrated before God. And in this way, his message has echoed down the centuries through thick and impenetrable walls of time and across the length and breadth of the planet. Even if you have no faith and do not fear the hereafter, at least be free in your lifetime and have integrity of character. One more thing, as a footnote, needs to be said. Some say the skies rained blood on that day. Not only Arabia recorded an event such as this. In the faraway lands too, even Great Britain noticed something amiss. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles state in an entry for the same year as the Battle of Karbala, 685. 685. In this year, in Britain, it rained blood, and milk and butter were turned into blood. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
उस हुसैन उस हुसैन इब्ने हैदर पे लाखों सलाम नबी के नवासे पे लाखों सलाम जिसको दोषे नबी पर बिठाया गया जिसका जन्नत से जोड़ा मंगाया गया जिसके भाई को जहर पिलाया गया जिसको बैठे बिठाए सताया गया उस हुसैन इब्ने हैदर